Today, I'm talking to Jessica Sands about the hidden impact of voice problems following COVID and some of the positive strategies that can help. Jessica is a specialist fatigue physiotherapist. She's the owner and director of Vitality 360, a specialist multidisciplinary fatigue and pain rehabilitation provider. Today, she will tell us about her own experience of COVID and in particular how it affected her voice. She will tell us what she learned about how to help others who are struggling with this hidden disability. And until we started this journey, I had no idea how common this is. What do you think people worry about most?
I think people worry when they lose their voice or they have voice problems around everything that surrounds communication, which actually is the whole of life when you think about it. Communicating with family members, your work, your ability to pick up the phone and deal with the problem with the electricity, your ability to communicate with your community, be able to have a connection on a dog walk. And actually that inability to communicate is very stressful and is not normal for human beings.
Yes, that's massive, isn't it? And what do you think is a myth that you've uncovered in your own voice journey?
Gosh, lots of myths around voice. One thing, actually, going into a pharmacy is that all these medicated sweets with menthol and mint and the ones that taste really shocking, that those are actually not good for the larynx. And in fact, just plain boiled sweets is better. They're actually irritating.
Okay, just thought. Thank you for that. Okay. So moving on, can you tell us briefly how this all started?
Yes, so I got COVID in the very, very first wave, even before it was recognised. I had about 3 months of repetitive coughing, coughing and coughing and coughing. And I didn't think a lot of it at first. Someone had a cough recently and I caught that. And then I just thought it was one of those things. It was winter time, but it caused so much coughing that I was really starting to struggle with my voice. And then what happened just before lockdown, I went out to a fairground and I was on one of those rides. And you know, when you're going down a roller coaster, like that. I did that and I felt like I'd been stabbed in the throat. It was a very sudden stabbing in the side of my throat. I just went like this and there was sudden pain in here. And it felt like I couldn't breathe because it was like a real panicky feeling. And I tried to talk and I couldn't talk. It was a very sudden, quite dramatic thing that happened. So that's how it started. We were very quite soon after that went into lockdown. And so I was left with going, whoa, something really bad's happened. And I don't know how to get help. This is the time, by the way, you remember on the telly, this is like mass graves. This is like people in big suits and you can't call an ambulance for anything. You can't even get into the GP. So at that time, it was quite worrying. I didn't really know what was happening. Eventually, I did get in to see someone, actually a nurse, and they said, actually, I think you've got asthma. Okay. Which just surprised me. I thought, I've not thought about asthma before. And I was coughing and she, bless her, she could see how exhausted I was and just said, you need to stop talking for a bit. And that was the first thing that happened. So that's what happened next. And then actually, I actually couldn't talk for some time. I was getting quite worried about this then because it just didn't seem to be getting better. Eventually, I was taken in for an endoscope down into my larynx. What they actually found a couple of things. They found that my larynx was twisted. It was actually asymmetric, which meant that one side was really struggling. And they also found that I had something called silent reflux. So silent reflux is what happens when you don't really know there's a problem, but actually some stomach acid comes up and it irritates the larynx. Talk some more about the mechanisms of that later on. But that's what happened. Yeah.
And I mean, I can't imagine that, as you said, it was a scary time for everybody anyway, but adding that as an extra layer, what did it actually feel like for you going through that?
It was really frightening to go through a voice problem like that. And of course, so if we think back, it was a time when it was very hard to get help. So I felt that it was felt a really lonely feeling. It was a kind of quite a frightening, lonely feeling. I think a lot of people and patients I work with now remember that feeling. It's going, I don't even know if I can get any help. The world is in crisis. I don't even know if I can get any help. So for me, what it felt like was lonely and scary. But the reality of it also was it felt very like I constantly had this kind of coarse sandpapery feeling in my throat. I had no vocal power. I couldn't project at all. I couldn't talk for very long at all. At first, I could only talk for 5 minutes, and hugely frustrating. Emotionally, hugely frustrating. It literally meant that I couldn't communicate with people at home. I couldn't communicate on the phone.
Mm.
And also isolated at that time. I couldn't even get on the phone, talk to my own family. I couldn't participate in all these Zoom meetings and all these cool things that people were doing. My world became really silent, became really quiet. And thankfully, I'm an introvert, but it was still, even for an introvert, it was still hard not to be able to communicate. And as things happened, things you had to get on the phone for, I couldn't do it. And obviously, it had a massive impact on my work as well. But what it largely felt like was frustrating, scary, and lonely. Actually.
Yeah. And what was it? What was life like not being able to talk? Because there was a period there where you couldn't talk. What was that like?
If you can't talk, you can't work. No, and work is a big part of my identity. I love my work. I couldn't actually see any patients because I didn't have the endurance to actually have a communication. I couldn't talk about what was happening, particularly. I couldn't get any support because I would have to talk to get support. I could have basic conversations at home. And when things were frustrating, I couldn't even argue with anyone. I guess you just want to talk and express yourself. And I couldn't. And the frustration, absolute massive frustration of not being able to vocalize your life, your feelings, your needs, and also to help other people. Part of helping somebody is to be able to talk to them. So actually that was massive for me because you don't realize, I think, until you've lost your voice, how absolutely crucial it is to your everyday life, your everyday reality, your everyday identity, your work, who you are. It's important. It's important for everything you do. You can't get anything done really without your voice. And I think the big thing was also just the not knowing. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if it was going to get better or not. COVID was a brand new illness. All the scary stuff on the telly, we didn't know which way it was going to go. And so there was a real sense of, I don't even know if this is ever going to come back. And that has a big impact then on how you feel.
Yeah. And as you say, it was a really uncertain time. The unknown's massive. What was happening with work? And as you said, work is a large part of you.
Do you know what was happening with work at the time around of COVID is, of course, that we're a fatigue specialist bunch of therapists, right? And of course, we were discovering that fatigue was a really important primary symptom of long COVID. Our whole team was just in, oh my goodness, this is something massive. And it's something we can help with, by the way. So what was happening for me at work was actually, it was quite cool in some ways that we were able to help and we were able to develop things, but I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk, or I couldn't talk for very long. So it was a time where I had to massively step up and I wasn't really well enough to step up. It was a time where I had to be very adaptable. And I ended up having to do a lot of things without talking, spreadsheets and like communicating on email, communicating by text. I had to really pace myself very carefully as well around work. And yeah, so work was actually really busy at a time where I actually just needed to have vocal rest. So it was a big challenge.
Yeah. And hindsight being a wonderful thing, I'm sure we'll come on to what was learned and what you've learned particularly and how you can apply that. But so given what you know now, what do you see is going on with voice problems?
A simple way of looking at voice problems is a bit like a garden. If you imagine a garden that has had a massive storm, okay? There are things broken, there's leaves all over the place, the birds have exited, everything's really chaotic. All the nutrients have been leached out of the soil. There's been a bit of a flood. And then you imagine a period of really intense drought that follows that. I see that a little bit like an analogy of what happens with the voice. So at that time, your voice is really struggling. But it's not just the larynx. So voice is not just the larynx. If we just rewind for a moment around how voice works, your lungs have to produce the air, which then travels through the larynx or the voice box, or some people call it the Adam's apple, here in the middle of the throat. And then it's your tongue and your mouth that creates the movements that give you your words. So actually, that's a multi-system thing, right? Your chest and your breathing has to be okay. Furthermore, the diaphragm at the bottom of the chest has to be functioning properly. It also has to function properly to control your stomach acid. And this is partly what happened with me, is that the stomach acid then became a problem, partly because the diaphragm was stuck and wasn't working properly. This is something that we really commonly see with COVID, is that the diaphragm goes into a bit of a fright, and it takes some cajoling to come out again. So I see this very much as a multi-systems thing. So if you imagine that dry garden, it's also lack of hydration. Okay. Everything, all the structures here of the throat get very dry. They need a lot of water. They need some sugar, actually. And also the movement around your tongue and jaw also needs to be good. So if you imagine then, we talk a lot about the biopsychosocial approach, the fact that all of health isn't just physical, it isn't just emotional, it's actually a combination of those things. There's a lot of physical things going on. There's the actual reality of the larynx problem. There's the physical reality of the fact that diaphragm's not working properly. In my story, I had jaw surgery about 20 years ago. So actually, inherently, I've got a lot of scar tissue inside my mouth. So the functioning of my tongue and my cheek muscles and things is also quite stiff. And that's partly as a historical. And then you've got the kind of psychosocial aspect, which is the stress and the uncertainty and the worry. And all of that builds into the muscle tension around these structures. But those structures have got to be loose in order to actually talk. Right? So if you imagine then that the neck and the shoulder and the tongue, everything's really tight, that then makes the whole situation worse. And you can end up in a bit of a vicious circle. You've obviously need to sleep well in order to feel okay and to not feel so tired. So there's a whole lot of things going on. And again, if you go back to that dry, cracked garden, it's a bit like that. Perhaps there's covered in aphids and it just needs some care. So I think that it's important to see voice as a whole multi-systems issue. This is not just one thing. There's lots and lots of different aspects. There's the social aspect of work and what do I do with work? And then money and income, that all starts to play in as well. If I can't work, I can't earn anything. That then contributes to more muscle tension. Then that means I can't sleep as well. And then I'm thinking, am I even going to ever get better? And then that means I can't sleep very well. And so then you end up in this horrible kind of vicious circle. And then you might even still be coughing. And so I was still coughing at this time, which was further irritating the problem. So then you've got to deal with the cough and you've got to understand what's going on with the cough. And can you help to reduce the cough and help to reduce the irritation as well? And sinuses, and if you're sleeping, for example, with your mouth open because your sinuses are blocked, that's also going to dry out that cracked, sore throat as well. So the way that I see it now is that it's a complex multi-system problem when you're dealing with voice.
You explain that beautifully. And we do with a lot of our clients is looking at the big picture. And that's what's really obvious here. But all of that in detail, building it all together in the biopsychosocial model just makes sense. So moving on and looking at perhaps what we can do, what would you recommend for people as the first step? What's the first thing people should do, or even from your experience, what's the first thing did you do or would you have done knowing what you know now?
I think if you're having a voice problem, the first thing to do is try not to panic. Okay. It's pretty scary. So trying not to panic. It's also quite normal for your voice to be affected by something like a cough, right? So the first thing is you know what, 6 to 8 weeks, let's just see if it settles down. It probably will. That's the first thing. It probably will settle down. get some rest, get some hydration, try not to talk and overexert your voice too much, and just see if you can have that nice first bit of rest. I'd say the first thing to do if it isn't resolving is to get some help. Get some help. Okay. We need to understand what's going on. That could be from a GP. It could be from a speech therapist. But really, you want to medically understand what's happening. I think getting a bit of help from GP, if that, again, wasn't that possible for me early on, but actually I ended up looking up lots of really useful things online. We can talk about that a little bit later on.
And would you advise people to stop doing things? And if so, what should people stop doing?
So what people should stop doing with voice problems is talking too much or the wrong straining, too much straining. Okay, but there's definitely a pacing and a graded activity aspect to voice rehabilitation for sure. So trying to find a baseline of talking, actually, trying to find what amount of talking feels okay and trying not to overstrain or overexert is a good thing. I've also brought my trusty gin bottle to explain we should probably not be drinking too much and trying to replace that with water, partly because alcohol dries out the vocal cords. Okay. And also we're trying to look after ourselves in terms of reflux. Okay. So again, some people may or may not know about reflux, or they might even know they've got it. So this is where we have to think about our citrus foods, our spicy foods, and we want to try and think about fatty foods and not eating too close to bedtime, things like that. So things like that will help to settle down the stomach acid. I don't need to use this anymore. Thankfully, it was a short-lived problem, but I found this out of date, Gaviscon, to help to control stomach acid, because again, that will be potentially irritating the larynx.
Fantastic. So plenty of things that people can do, feeling like that, actively taking control. But I wondered, alongside that, what's the mindset shift that's most helped you? Because as you mentioned, this is it's a realistic approach that we need to take.
I had a big kind of battle with myself with the frustration of it. And I think the biggest mindset was acceptance. And it was just this thing of going, okay, this is what's happening. I have to go with it. And the more I fight it, the more I actually make it worse. So the more muscle tension I create for myself. And, I can't change the physical reality of what's going on with my voice. So I have to accept it for how it is. I have to accept it for how it is. So I think moving to a place of acceptance with it and a place of tolerating the uncertainty.
Yeah.
I get to a place of tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing if I was going to get better and not knowing if this was ever going to be okay again. And I think I did get to a place of that, but it did take some time.
And here we are a few years down the line. How have things changed? How are things now?
I think I'm massively better. I could not have done this, obviously, a little while ago. Yeah, things are much better. I can now work, obviously. Well, not obviously, but I can. I can now work and I can now have an hour's interaction with somebody. Thankfully, my job isn't talking all the time, but I now much more carefully pace my talking activities with my not talking activities. So people in my team, for example, will know that I won't do back-to-back meetings because in between, I need to settle down my voice and do some paperwork, write a report, do some social media posts, whatever. But then I'll be ready to talk again. So I pace myself quite differently, but things are usually better. And I can do most things now, but with some planning, still some pacing. And there are still some things I can't do. But yeah, most things are back to where they were.
Brilliant. Do you have any relapses or difficulties?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, I'm just going to pop one of these in. I'll explain it in a minute. It looks like a white mint tablet. And in fact, it tastes like mint. I'm going to explain it in a minute. I'm just putting it in my mouth and I'm going to stick it to my gum. Okay. The slightly weird thing that I'm doing here, but it'll make sense in a minute. What that's doing is, and it will physically stick to my gum and it will slowly dissolve over the next hour or so. I forgot to put one in. It's called Xylem Melt. I don't know if other brands are available, but it's Xylem Melt. And it just stimulates saliva, which means that I'm not getting so dry as I talk. Okay, so forgive that little interlude. Yes, I absolutely do still have setbacks. And in fact, before we came on air, I was just saying to you, Charlie, that I've had bad preparation for this because yesterday I had quite a full day. I went to a strengthening class, which kind of really wore me out. So I was feeling quite tired already today. That kind of, ugh. And then I ran a scout session with 24 children outside where I had to talk and project. And then I went straight to a friend's house who was having an art exhibition. And that is honestly, what I still struggle with is that kind of environment where there's a lot of talking in the same room. Very difficult for me because it's quite loud. I feel like I've got to project, and I find that pretty stressful now. And I would generally avoid doing that for too long. But I can still go, I just need to stop a bit earlier than I would have done before. And I've also found that, for example, using these little devices called loops, they're like just little earplugs, basically. That also helps me a great deal because it cuts out on background noise and means that I don't feel like I have to project my voice. So it actually calms my voice down if it's not so loud. So that's also quite interesting. Yes, no, for sure. There are still things that I deal with now and that I still have to do. For example, today I also did a little humidification before this conversation. My point about yesterday was it was quite a full-on day for my voice. And I wake up feeling quite croaky this morning. And then I had a workman come and do some drilling right next to my window, which truthfully stressed me out a bit. So then I'm getting muscle tension in my mouth and my tongue. So I went to go and do some humidification, which really helped. That's literally face over a hot bowl. I've also got this little device, which I don't use anymore, actually. It's a little handheld device with a mask attached to it. And you pop in some saline into that, and it makes a little mist. And that was something that I used a lot when I was really in trouble before. I don't use it anymore. I don't need to. And if I was to do a training session, a webinar, or leading a meeting, I would make sure that I'm humidified, but I've also got a massive pint of water. And as I say, these little silent melt things, which just keeps things a bit more lubricated so that as I'm talking, I also have to be very conscious, and I still do find that if I talk like in a training situation or something, I'll try and project too much. That's also quite tricky. So I have to consciously remember still to drop my shoulders, to try to relax my mouth, my tongue. And there are some exercises. Again, I don't need to do them anymore in the same way, but there are exercises around the tongue, around the mouth that help to keep things mobile, which then less strain on the vocal cords as well. So yeah, no, there are definitely still issues that I deal with. I was diagnosed as asthmatic, which is not really the case. I had COVID, but I did have one of these asthma pumps at that time. And the other thing that was important was to use a spacer so that the medication doesn't go straight into the back of the throat. If it goes straight into the back of the throat, it can irritate the larynx. So again, you're trying to stop irritating the larynx. I couldn't take on, I used to run big team days, for example, like sometimes even 2 or 3 days long. I can't do that anymore. But truthfully, that's okay. That's okay with me. I'm not sure I want to do that anymore anyway. So that's okay with me. I just do things in a different way now. I still contribute in smaller, shorter bits rather than one big dramatic thing.
It sounds like you've developed a huge number of tools and resources. You've got a lot of insight. You're looking at this in a wonderful problem-solving manner and applying things that work for you. Is there any advice or any sort of top tips that you would give to somebody else or anyone else that might be watching this as a sort of take-home message?
So top tips for people who have voice problems include pacing. Okay, so pacing is important because you have to manage how much you talk, how long you talk for, and the balance between talking and resting. The other important tip is actually to relax fully.
Love it. But
We have our little Buddha prop here. So actually relaxing fully and learning how to relax fully is very important because we have to get the structures of the mouth, the tongue, the throat, the shoulders into a better muscular state of softness. And that softness will therefore help the voice. So I encourage people to exercise in whatever way is right for them, and they should consult their healthcare professional on exercise. But usually it includes things like yoga, gentle stretching, walking, being outside, those types of things that help to rest the system. There are some practical things around food and drink. Caffeine and alcohol are not good for the voice. And medicated tablets and things like menthol and mint and all those kind of funny flavors you get in cough sweets are not good. And all those things that people inhale are not good, but definitely hydration. So the vocal cords need a lot of water. You need to be drinking plenty of water and avoid the alcohol and caffeine because it just dehydrates everything. And actually it affects sleep as well, potentially, and can make you feel more stressed. And of course, so part of it is managing stress and managing the tension in your life is actually part of managing a voice problem. Now, you might also need to get some help with the physical stuckness of the diaphragm or of the tongue. I got help through speech therapy. I would recommend that if someone's having a problem that's lasting over about 8 weeks, that they do try and get a speech therapy referral. I also happen to have an osteopath, but this particular osteopath actually works with opera and opera singers. And I was very lucky to have her. And actually, she got into my mouth literally with her thumbs and worked around my tongue and my diaphragm, literally got into my diaphragm to help release it. As I say, physios can do that work as well. If you're having problems with muscle tension, I would recommend going to see a physio. So there's something around physically looking at the structures that might be tight. I also advise people need to be thinking about their breathing. Okay. What often happens is this, it's kind of physics if you think about it. The diaphragm, the stomach, the chest, the voice, the mouth, they're all united in physics. Right. So we have to have the diaphragm free to help with the pumping action, if you like, of the stomach. That needs to be free to help you with the voice. The chest needs to be breathing properly to help you with the control. And your mouth and your tongue need to be loose to produce the sounds. So all of those things together are very important. I think some other things that I would advise people to consider is background noise. So actually talking to people about, oh, do you mind turning the radio off? I can't actually communicate when the radio's on in the background. I still can't. Or in a car, actually. It's really loud in a car. So actually you don't have to have big, long conversations in the car. You can just chill out, listen to music, listen to the radio, that kind of thing. In terms of other things that can help, as I say, thinking about the social side of things is around work and thinking about what you can do instead of what you can't do. It's very easy to go into the fact I can't talk, so I can't do anything. That's actually true. There's lots of things you can do. And I found lots of things. And I deliberately graded my work actually from 1 to 10 and the intensity. And I thought 10 out of 10 was delivering a big day of training. Definitely couldn't do that. But 1 was checking my emails. Of course I can check my emails. I can't talk, but I can check my emails. The time was also very exhausted. But the point is that there were lots of things I could do. I could do spreadsheets. I could do planning. I could do communications in different ways. I could do some design, which I actually found quite fun. I designed some programs for early intervention for long COVID whilst I couldn't talk. That was actually really satisfying so I think the other thing is to keep connected with people. That when your voice gets taken away, you lose your connection with people. You have to find other ways to connect with people. Whether it's through, again, just non-vocal ways of doing that, you've got to keep social connection. So it might surprise people that I set up a COVID response group in my village. I did that while I couldn't talk. I did that mostly through emails, communication. Why did I do that? Partly I could see a need for it, but I needed it for me too. So think about what you need for yourself. You might need a project while you're not working. You might need a project. You might need to do something that's important to you for your sense of purpose is also very important. And exercise for me was a massive part of getting better as well. And actually just slowly walking, gradually building up, gradually able to do a little bit more. Some of my lowest points were when I couldn't do anything physically. So build up with that, of course, exercise then helps you to feel better. You've got to be careful with exercise, and we know that it's good to work with someone who knows about exercise. But I think getting help as well. You don't have to do this journey on your own. This is something that actually there are a lot of people who are there to help. As I say, GPs and speech therapists. You can look up the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists have got some really good information on voice care, for example. And so don't do this on your own. You can come and talk to people about pacing. We offer a service in Vitality 360 that can help with pacing and grading of activity, fatigue management generally, considering your sleep. So all of those things together, and if you're asthmatic, to be really making sure that you're using a spacer, make sure that you have a glass of water after you've taken your inhaler. I think I've covered most things. And in digestion, if there is any possibility of that's something you can talk to a pharmacist or a GP about as well. And if you're finding it extremely stressful, which frankly it is, and you find that it's affecting your mood and you find that your mood is plummeting, then get some help. Get some professional help with that. It's very normal and to actually go into a bit of a depression with this because it affects your whole life. It's like whole life gets suddenly turned upside down. So it's a normal human reaction to find that pretty challenging and very threatening. Get some help as well if mood starts to drop. Yeah. Those are the few top tips that I've learned.
I think they're hugely extensive top tips. And I think you've covered every base, which is fantastic. And again, not just one thing, lots of different things that people can experiment with, test out. As you say, seeking help is also one of those things, and getting some advice from specialists. And Vitality 360 is a group of specialist therapists. We've seen this, as you say. We know how to help. And I just want to say at this point, thank you. Thank you, Jess, for everything. I'm sure there's loads more that we can talk about, and maybe we will one day, and pick this up and look at the journey further. But I just want to say thank you and ask if there's anything else that you wanted to say before we finish today.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I haven't really spoken about this with anyone. So this is actually quite a new thing for me even to be talking about this. And I have found that patients have found it helpful when I share some of my journey as well. I think there's something about the importance of hope, actually. It's you can find yourself in it's quite a despairing situation. So the importance of hope, but not hope. Oh yeah, I'm going to be totally fine, totally better. I don't mean that kind of hope. I just mean, do you know what? Hope for some improvement. Hope that you can cope better with the symptoms you have, maybe. I'm not totally better with my voice. I'm not. But I'm living a great life. I'm out there running and playing hockey and climbing mountains, and I'm running a business, and all of those things I can do, even with the impairment that I have with my voice. So I think don't sentence yourself. Don't sentence yourself to a negative outcome, is what I'd say, which is quite hard because that's where all the thoughts go. But also, don't do it on your own. Don't do it on your own. Just try to find ways to communicate, try to find ways to get help. And look, it doesn't have to be us. Like, there's lots of other ways of getting help. Just find someone who can look at unpicking what specific things you need to do for your action plan and create that action plan.
No, but it's just so wonderful. And again, seeing your plan reminds us how personal this is. And again, I'm really grateful for your sharing your story to them. And I think everything you've said has been hugely useful, and all your learnings and your insights that you now have, and to be able to share them is phenomenal. So thank you very much for that. And again, in summary, if you want to find out more about how Vitality 360 might be able to help, do get in touch. It's Vitality 360. We've got a website. We're on LinkedIn. We're on social media. Do get in touch if you feel that you want to just find out what we do, how we can help. Do a 15-minute chat with one of our specialist therapists and to find out how we might be able to help you on your journey, whether it's with fatigue or specifically voice problems, and then do get in touch. And thank you again.
Thanks very much, Charlie.